Hey guys, welcome back to Sports with Mono and Mono. It's February 19th, 2022 already. Um, Here with my partner Steve and our producer Rob in the background.
Good morning.
How was your week, Steve?
It was good. I mean, it's you said February 19th.
Yeah.
When we can sneak out of February in another week, I'm happy. Once we
Yeah,
get to March, although I still think we have a blizzard. We're due a blizzard at some point, and should
it's
happen in the
possible.
next 3 weeks.
That's the Northeast for you.
But the winter's been mild.
Yes, it
It's
has.
been fine by me.
Well, listen, thanks for joining us, everybody. Welcome back. And like I said, we start our show off, and our show monologue is sponsored by Coriano Trucking of Summerhill, New York. And Steve, you have the mic.
Thank you. Ever since the James Harden trade went down a little over a week ago, I've been thinking about my love of basketball and how it was formed, right? So we grew up in Oakland, New Jersey. So there were two things. There were ponds in New Jersey where you could don ice skates and you could play basketball. And we turned in to be basketball guys, with where we grew up. We had a piece of plywood on a telephone pole outside our house. We had a hoop and we had a chain net, or we had, but we had the net. But I loved playing basketball. I just absolutely loved it. I loved shooting. I loved 3-on-3 games, playing with my brothers, this, that, and the other thing. Then once I went into the gym, so on and so forth. That was my love of basketball. And we love hockey, but we never played hockey, right? So we have this separate appreciation because we can't skate, right? Whatever. But we're diehard Ranger fans. So we talked about the fact that the Knicks in '73 were old enough to remember them winning the World Championship. So not only playing basketball, but watching it. So the Knicks, Walt Frazier, the Celtics, John Havlicek, Dave Cowens, all that stuff in the '70s, right? To Wes Unseld and the Bullets and Elvin Hayes and until Larry Bird and Magic Johnson come along and so on until Jordan. So back to James Harden. My love of basketball for the NBA, it is so tough for me now to watch this. It really is. I mean, there's only a few guys I admire from this Steph Curry's, you know, there's really just a handful of players. Watching James Harden maneuver from Houston to the Nets and then Nets to the Sixers, it just embodies to me how my love of basketball has just year by year dissipated. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about.
Well, listen, I can see your point because you and I have talked about this offline. Um, my position was when he was holding the Houston Rockets hostage and said, I want an NBA championship, so I need to be traded. And you're right. It's just I couldn't agree with you more. When we go back to those days of, like you mentioned, the Havliceks, the Fraziers, the Knicks, it was we watched it every single day of the week. It was enjoyable. And now, yeah, there's certainly talent out there, right? The young guns that we talked about, the John Morants, the Trey Youngs, these guys, they're excellent. But it's become a league of, I want to play where I want to play, and that's all there is to it. And again, he held Houston hostage to go to Brooklyn because he thought that was his best chance to get a title with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And I don't know if that's going to pan out, but he wore out his welcome. It's more about me, the stats of me, and instead of back when it was you brought up 1973, it was I don't care how many points I score as long as we win a championship, and that's certainly changed. And I couldn't agree with you more. I
Yeah.
really couldn't.
And then one fond memory too about that 1973 Nick team or what have you was every Saturday night we'd have our dinner, what have you. Sunday night was the Monahan family meal. So Saturday night we were kind of, our parents would go out or whatever. But the New York Knicks were on at 8 o'clock on Cablevision,
Yep.
right? And the Garden announcer was John Condon. So, and the seats were darkened, but we wouldn't miss the game. Our lives depended upon it, right? So, the Chicago Bulls could be coming in with Bob Love, the Detroit Pistons with Bob Lanier,
Yep.
things like that. And we wouldn't miss it if our lives depended upon it, right?
Yep.
And then you flip to Sunday night where it'd be the Rangers are at home against the Islanders or something.
Yeah.
So
You're right.
that's it. But
And listen, we're going to touch base on the NBA, but first, let's talk about, there was a football game, which seems like a month ago, but it was only a week ago. It was the Super Bowl. And I think both of you and I felt pretty confident that the Rams were going to prevail. They had a lot more talent. We talked about the impact that Aaron Donald could have, and he certainly did, right? I mean, the sentimental favorite was Joe Burrow and so forth, but it turned out just kind of like we thought. Aaron Donald dominated the defense to put the pressure on and sack Joe Burrow for 7 times, right? Tying only Roger Staubach's record. I guess that was against the Colts, I think, if I remember right. You remember, right?
Might have been again. Hey, Rob, can you look that up? Because I'm drawing a blank myself. Because Craig Morton started for the Cowboys
against the Broncos. So.
What's that, guys?
Can you look up to see what Super Bowl it was? Roger Staubach got sacked 7 times because Burrow got sacked 7 times.
All right.
Yeah.
Right. Craig Morton started for the Cowboys against the Colts, so it can't be that. Roger was the MVP against the Dolphins. I don't know. It might be against the Broncos, to be honest.
Yeah, it could have been. But overall, the game was, it was a pretty close game, obviously. But there was a couple of things that stood out for me when, the Rams couldn't run the ball at all, right? And that was, and Sean McVay, he wouldn't waver. He stuck with it and just kept going and going and going with that. And, I thought that was kind of going to be a mistake. I thought it was time to give Stafford, but of course there was a lot of things that happened, right? Beckham went down with an injury and so forth. But overall, a couple of things I noted in the game. For the Bengals, this guy, I think it was Logan Wilson. What a player he turned out to be. I didn't hear much of him, but he was pretty dominant in that game from a Cincinnati Bengals perspective.
Yeah, foundation piece.
Yeah, he's a foundation piece. That's a good way to put it. But overall, I think the talent level that the Rams had and the game that Donald had really solidified the fact that, and it was very appropriate that Stafford and Cooper Kupp, right? I mean, all year long, these two were the tandem in the league, and I'm very happy for the fact that Donald got it, that Kupp got it, and that Stafford got it. And I don't know what the line was before the game started. I think it was 4.5. You would.
I lost at 4 points. I had the Rams -4. So I lost. From the spread perspective.
Super Bowl 10.
Super Bowl 10
against the Steelers.
Steelers. Okay.
Yeah, that's silly me. It's the first Steeler Cowboy Super Bowl. The Lynn Swan game.
Yep.
Yep.
Hey, but listen, overall, we talked about before the game that the commitment that Sean McVay made, that he had the components, but he didn't have the quarterback. He pulls the trigger on it, and it worked out for him.
Listen, the Rams, we talked about it. The World Series of Poker, they put all the chips on the table, and guess what? They won the big prize. And Matt Stafford, obviously was the difference here as far as, the quarterback for the LA Rams.
Yep.
And Von Miller absolutely contributed in that late season acquisition. Beckham contributed. but their foundation pieces are all. They were the best team this year.
Yeah.
The Bengals had their chances, though. Let's make no mistake about it. And if you look on the video, when Aaron Donald finally sacks Burrow, probably I think it might have been the last one. Jamar Chase, Jalen Ramsey fell down, and Jamar Chase is wide open. And if Burrow had just an extra split second, the outcome could have been a lot different. That being said, I don't know if the Bengals are going to be back there anytime soon. Despite Joe Burrow. The Rams, I thought Aaron Donald clearly should have been the MVP of the game.
I thought so too.
But I can't, say that Cooper Kupp doesn't fully deserve it. But Aaron Donald was just a wrecking ball, and he was the difference. And the Cincinnati offensive line finally showed their true wares, which was the weakest aspect of the Bengals. They gave Zach Taylor an extension after the Super Bowl. Cincinnati should be fine. They have an awful lot of money available in free agency, and the future's bright for them. The Rams, I don't know if they're going to win it again. I can't say that they are. I really can't. But this year was special, and Matt Stafford is very happy that it worked out.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, like I said, he's one of the good guys. He was humble. He wasn't flashy, and he's got a lot of pieces around him. But that opens up the question. We talked about before. Does this solidify Matt Stafford's going to the Hall of Fame? Was it necessary for him to win the game to go to the Hall of Fame? In today's day and age, maybe so. I don't think there's any question about it. I mean, a lot of people would come back and say, look, the guy was never an MVP, never won a playoff game. His numbers are, they're good numbers, but Hall of Fame quality. What's your thoughts, Steve? I mean, was this guy going to the Hall of Fame before?
He's absolutely going to the Hall of Fame now that he won the Super Bowl.
Right.
But one of your favorite boys, Phillip Rivers, is going to the Hall of Fame. Yep. So why wouldn't Matt Stafford, not winning a Super Bowl, would probably have the same amount of yards? Yep. Matt Stafford's going to the Hall of Fame. If you think Phillip Rivers is going to the Hall of Fame, let's say Matt Stafford doesn't win the Super Bowl, he still would have gone to the Hall of Fame.
Well, because the reason I bring it up is because Joe Namath is in the Hall of Fame, and if you look at Joe Namath's overall career, it doesn't eke Hall of Fame right off, but he won the biggest game of his career, and that got him to the Hall of Fame.
Not only was it the biggest game of the career, it was the biggest game in NFL history if you really look at it because of the merger, right? And the fact that the Baltimore Colts were, so predominantly favored, and they were, this 19. Wasn't even right. Yeah. But one game, but when we talk about one game with Joe Namath, it really embodies like saving the league or the league rocketing forward because of Joe Namath. But people, Joe Namath stats are god awful. Barely 50% passing.
Yeah.
The interception to touchdown ratio off the charts.
I mean, he could throw the ball 95 yards in the air for sure.
But, listen, Joe Namath, you have to give him a little bit of pass. He's out drinking, getting laid, till 5 a.m. in New York City before a game. So we'll give him a little bit of a pass.
But listen, overall, I mean, it was certainly a very exciting playoff run, for the NFL. It was some great games. And you're right. Whether Cincinnati makes it back or it's the year that the Buffalo Bills finally, get over that little hump, it's going to be
coming.
To see. Yeah.
It's coming. I got to think the Bills in the next year or two finally get one.
Yep. So anyway, let's put the NFL in our rearview mirror, and I wanted to move on to the Olympics because Steve, you and I talked about it. I mean, it's more snowboarding and flipping and doing all that stuff, which I don't dismiss as a talent for sure, but I mean, is this what it? It didn't have that allure for me that it did in years past, and I just wanted to hear your thoughts on whether the Olympics were let's classify as a success, or is it something that people are losing interest in from a winter perspective?
I, I can't say it was a success. I didn't have this takeaway of just pure excitement and thrilling moments and um,
Because we go back to the old days when there,
all of
this,
America, rah rah rah. I just didn't sense it.
and in the old days it was, skiing had these marquee guys, right? Klammer and Stenmark and in speed skating, Eric Heiden, and this was kind of can't miss TV back then. And for me, I mean, there's so many different kind of sports now that I think it all loses its luster a little bit, and there's really no marquee. I mean, look, what was the number one story at the Olympics was, the girl Valeva from the ice skater, right, testing positive, and that became a story. She subsequently didn't win the gold medal, so that became a story rather than the performance itself. And I don't know. I didn't see it in anything. I thought the most captivating part for the U.S. was the U.S. women's hockey team, and unfortunately, they, to my surprise, I watched the game. They lose to
I mean, it's not a surprise.
Canada, so they huh?
It's not a surprise. These two play constantly for the World Championships, for the Olympic Championships, or whatever it is. In Canada, right? It's always 3-2, 2-1, something along those lines. It's a great hockey game. They gave it all. Canada, that's a great rivalry with the women hockey.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I don't think the Olympics were a success. And NBC or the networks that pay gazillions of dollars for the rights of these, I can't see the viewership being off the charts.
Yeah.
I mean,
we're talking about sports now where, we're focusing, and this isn't a knock, we're not professional curlers, but I mean, is that really exciting? To me, it just didn't have it. And
it's exciting for the curling fans, but outside of that, no.
I guess. But my point was, though, when we were back watching Eric Heiden, we weren't speed skating fans, but we were enamored with this kind of competition that he was facing, and he comes out dominant. And even the hockey thing for the men's, I think it was a big loss, and it took a lot of interest away that the NHL guys didn't go there. This is a long way from 1980, and I just, like I said, I wanted to get more involved in the Olympics. I wanted to watch it, but I was having a hard time getting excited about watching the monobob.
Well, I got to tell you, the men's hockey, I think they were 3-0, and they medal round and all that stuff, and the head coach is David Quinn, ex-Rangers and my BU boy. And they lose to Slovakia, and out they go. So they haven't medaled, the Olympic hockey team. I think this is the third consecutive Olympics where they haven't even medaled. I mean, would you like to have NHL players there if they're eligible? Sure, you want the best of the best if you can have it. But these kids gave a really good effort, and it's unfortunate they didn't win, or at least medal. Get a silver or bronze. So.
All right. Well, I think it all wraps up tonight anyway. But like I said, it just didn't have that allure that it once had for me. And I don't know.
Not even close. Not even close. Not even close. No.
So, Steve, let's move back on to basketball, because it's the NBA, and we did. I certainly wanted to touch on Harden, and one last point to him. You and I talked during the week. I really thought this guy was a great basketball player when he was, and he didn't seem selfish. I don't know what has happened to this guy that he's tarnished his legacy forever and lost me as a supporter. He just came to work. He played every game. And yeah, he could shoot the lights out, but you know what? This isn't the kind of guy. And Kevin Durant said, you know what? Send him somewhere else because he's not working out for us. And I'm glad you brought that up in the monologue.
Yeah. Again, I mean, I can't really further expound. I think people know my opinion of James Harden by now.
I do. There was an interesting thing, and the more and more I thought about it, it's right. Adam Silver came out regarding this vax mandate, right? With that's actually keeping Kyrie Irving from playing home games, but yet road guys can be unvaccinated and play in New York, and it makes zero sense. Not that I'm supporting Kyrie Irving in any way, but that rule doesn't make any sense. Agreed?
Yeah, you know what? To be honest, I didn't even know about it until Silver appeared this week and said how absolutely silly this rule is. So if you have half a brain and you want to be objective and you read this rule, it's so ridiculous. It's not even funny.
It is.
You talk about, so the New York mayor, there's a new New York mayor for people outside our area. He understands it's a ridiculous rule, but it sounds as if he's not going to do anything about it. So.
Well, I think this is all coming to it's coming to an end. And, when Adam Silver, the commissioner himself, comes out and says this thing's wrong. And I think there's going to be, as we're winding down with this pandemic, I think that's going to be a non-factor. I think that mandate will be lifted. Kyrie Irving will be back. So, we're heading into All-Star weekend, which means, right, we're at the halfway point, and let's see where we stand with this. I think if in the East, and Mike Garvey has brought this up to me on several occasions about, a team that really nobody's even talking about, the Miami Heat. They're leading the Eastern Conference, right? They're at the top. And, you and I have talked about Jimmy Butler, what kind of a player he is. But I think that's one of the biggest surprises to me in the first half of the NBA season is them and the Chicago Bulls. I think when you look at the Eastern Conference, you definitely can't rule out the Nets, and you can't rule out Giannis and the Bucks. And I don't think Harden's going to make a difference one bit in Philadelphia. But the way I see it from an Eastern Conference perspective, it's wide open as opposed to the Western Conference. It's really only a 2-team race, right? It's Golden State and Phoenix. Who else has even a remote chance? What are your thoughts?
Now, you mentioned the Chicago Bulls. You have to mention DeMar DeRozan and what kind of year this guy's having. He's averaging, I think he's averaging definitely over 27 a game.
Oh,
he just broke Wilt Chamberlain record, right?
Yeah.
So I almost fell off my chair when I said, "What? Broke a Wilt Chamberlain?" Whoa, what could that be?
But what was that? That was his scoring 25 points and shooting over 50% in 5 straight games or something.
Yeah, right. So now Wilt only has like Wayne Gretzky, probably 347 other NBA offensive records. But DeMar DeRozan is leading the Bulls, and the Bulls are back. They're competitive, which is good.
With Zach LaVine, he's a player.
Yeah, I mean he's been banged up a bit, but to Mike Garvey's point, the Miami Heat, when they're healthy with the Jimmy Butler and so on, they're formidable. The Bucks, if healthy, you still got to favor them to come out of the East.
Yeah, so do me a favor. Can you watch the All-Star game for me tomorrow? Because I won't be watching it.
In fact, we're gonna, we were gonna save this to the end and give Rob a little present that he can watch the All-Star game for both of us,
What's the over and under in combined score? 4.
Why do I have to watch the All-Star?
I'll pass.
Why is it incumbent upon me? to have to watch the All-Star game.
Well, it's Team Durant versus Team LeBron, and may the best team win.
So speaking of Team LeBron, just real quick about the Lakers. Yeah, it's the Phoenix Suns and the
Golden State.
Warriors, right? The LA Lakers are. It's bad. Let's just say that. And even in my monologue, I didn't mention LeBron James, which maybe I should have. As the torch being passed, from Michael Jordan and so on. I don't dislike LeBron James. I can't say I dislike him, but I'm not. I'm not. LeBron. I appreciate the talent, no doubt.
Yeah,
But
he's great.
I'm so sick of the Commissioner LeBron and LeBron wants this and all that.
Yeah.
Anthony Davis to me is, he's hurt again. Really fine player. Want nothing to do with him.
Yeah,
You can have him. So the Lakers are in trouble. And
well, like I said, this is part 2 of the season coming up. We'll see how it pans out. But before we wrap up with the NBA, Steve, the NBA Hall of Fame finalists were announced, and as our loyal listeners know, we're very particular about who gets into the Hall of Fame. So here are some notable finalists that I wanted to run by you. Give me your yay or nay right out of the gate. Michael Cooper.
nay.
You know what? I looked at it. I mean, he was a part of 5 championship teams, defensive player in the year. I don't have a problem with it. I don't know if this is can't be his first year of eligibility. He's been retired for 20 years. But out of the list I saw of Tim Hardaway, Manu Ginobili, I thought I could make a case for Michael Cooper more than the other 2 guys. I don't know.
Nay.
Nay? Wow. Okay.
This is yay and nay.
All right. How about George Karl? No titles.
No, I'm going to say yay because of longevity and the amount of wins I'm sure he
Yeah, he's got 1,000 wins, but no titles. So I don't know. I mean,
he's been to the finals.
He's always rubbed the sports writers and everybody the wrong way. So I'm going to say he's not going to get in. But I wanted to run that. Is Tim Hardaway a Hall of Famer? Nay. I looked at Ginobili's numbers. He was part of a couple of dynasty periods with the Spurs, but overall, he only averaged 13 points a game. That's not Hall of Fame worthy, right?
No, listen, Manu Ginobili had a very, very good career and was instrumental in the Spurs' success. And he's an international player as well. He's got to make a Hall of Fame. I think because of the international experience on top of it.
But I was actually surprised that he only averaged 13 points in his career. That's a little bit lower than I thought.
It's not surprising. I mean, you got the big fundamental and David Robinson and
Duncan
and Tony Parker and on and on.
Yeah. But anyway, Hall of Fame, I don't think so. So see, let's just move on with a couple of things from Major League Baseball. Obviously, and our Major League Baseball segment is sponsored by Lynch Toyota of Manchester, Connecticut, loyal sponsor of the show. Couple of things. The lockout, I'm going to assume that this is going to come to a close fairly soon. I mean, spring training will be delayed, but once this happens, they finally can come to some sort of an agreement and the lockout ends. There's going to be a flurry of free agency signings that are going to have to happen in a very short period of time. I'm sure they're working behind the scenes right now. But there was one interesting thing that came out was you and I have talked about Fernando Tatis and locking up these young guys early. Juan Soto, the Nationals apparently offered him that same kind of deal, $350 million. He's one of the, let's say, the top 3 or 4 talents in the league.
Yeah.
Is he going to get that kind of money? I think so, right?
Listen, to me, well, it just means he doesn't want to play in Washington. If this guy stays healthy for another year or however long he needs to, hit free agency.
Yeah.
Listen, I mean, turning down 350. We talked about it when Tatis signed his deal.
Yeah.
You're 20 something years old. You could get in your car, today and get into a car accident and your
Yep.
career is over.
Yeah, you're right. But that was
rolling the dice. But his agent is Scott Boras, so to me, it means hold off one, have another great year.
Yeah.
You'll be the highest paid player,
I guess.
and you're going to get $400 million, or you'll exceed the Mike Trout number. The kid's 24, I think.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And there was, speaking of the Nationals, Ryan Zimmerman finally retired after 17 years, right? Considered Mr. National, played there their whole career.
Yeah.
And of course, when somebody like him retires, normally everyone says, is he a Hall of Famer? And I looked at his numbers. They are not Hall of Fame numbers.
I felt the same. I'm a Ryan Zimmerman fan. Loved the story, drafted by the Expos. And, kind of like the year when they moved the franchise to Washington. So he was the face of the franchise, the captain of the franchise. Finally led him to a World Series, all good stuff. But I looked at his numbers, and I was expecting a lot more production.
So was I.
If I remember correctly, 1,700 hits, something like that.
Right, but only a 277 lifetime average.
277. The homers, 200 something.
284.
Right.
Barely 1,000 ribbies.
Right. But Ryan Zimmerman's qualities were leadership, character.
No, definitely.
And listen, he produced in big spots for them. So, but he had a great career. Really good. But Hall of Fame, no.
No, I agree. And the other, I guess, the big story is, and this came down yesterday, this guy, what was his name? Tyler Day or whatever, the guy who was
Tyler Skaggs.
Yeah, for the Tyler Skaggs drug scandal and so forth. And Matt Harvey was one of the key witnesses in this thing. And it was an ugly situation altogether for Major League Baseball. And it ties back into they're going to stop testing for steroids and so forth. But what were your thoughts on this Tyler Skaggs situation overall?
I'm not shocked by it. I mean, the Angels is the guy that stood trial. I mean, he was the go-to guy. It's
the pharmacist, if you will. Right?
Yeah, but it's not like the guy. It's in the Angels clubhouse, and he's like, hey, I got Percocet, I got oxycodone, so right, I got Coke, whatever you need, right? No, the players just know, hey, I need a Percocet, I need this, right? And remember, Major League Baseball in the 70s and 80s, there used to be a candy bowl in the middle of the clubhouse with uppers and downers and all this other shit, right? But the point is, Matt Harvey. I think we now know why Matt Harvey imploded with the New York Mets.
Yep.
Because his nightlife, we obviously know now his cocaine use was out of control.
Yep.
I don't know if people have seen, but if you go on the internet, there are some pictures of Matt Harvey on the mound, bleeding from the nose. Like, not just like a little drip here. I mean, like, bleeding. And there's still shots of it. And I was at work with my colleague Frank, who's this diehard Met fan. He's like, Steve, you got to come over and look at this. And I'm like, holy Christ. I said, how did we not know this? Or like, how is this not like live broadcast of a Met game whenever, a Harvey pitch? So in 2015 or something, right?
Yeah, that actually stole the spotlight from the trial itself. And you're right. This was he was considered a phenom with the Mets and hasn't gotten anybody out since. And
Yeah.
now it all makes sense. You're right.
And obviously you compare him to like Dwight Gooden and so on and so forth. Like the Mets, the Darryl Strawberry, that,
Yep.
it impacted their Met careers.
Yep.
Bad news for Matt Harvey is, his numbers were atrocious with the Orioles last year. He's
He
a
hasn't
free
gotten
agent,
anybody out. Yeah.
totally, but he's a free agent.
Yeah.
And now he's going to look at a suspension because on top of it. So is Matt Harvey is a major league team going to take a Matt Harvey? I have to think his career is over.
Yeah, I agree.
At
I
what,
agree.
30,
But that totally did overshadow the fact
I mean,
that,
what is he, 30, 31, 32?
Yeah, he's got to
By
be
now.
probably 32, 33. Yeah.
Right. But the fall, and listen, let me just finish on Matt Harvey. He was a dick in New York. Okay. He actually let this celebrity status go to his head. And he's getting his comeuppance, put it that
Yep.
way. But
That's
he
right.
had New York City, like he was Mr. New York City for like 3 year stretch there.
Yeah, he had a good run in New York, but he blew it all up. He blew it all up.
He did.
So listen, I just wanted to touch real quick on the NHL because we mentioned it last week, but Sid the Kid got his 500th goal.
He did.
Him and only him and Ovechkin are the two active members of the 500 goal club. But we talked about it before. I know a lot of people don't like him because he's kind of a complainer and whatever, but 500 goals in today's day and age is pretty good. And he was the kid who came up and he was going to be the next phenom. And I don't think he's disappointed when you look at his overall resume with world championships in the NHL and the Canada Cup and the Olympic gold. I give my kudos to him. I like him, and I think it's a milestone worth mentioning again.
We talked about it last week. Sidney Crosby, when we say he was the next phenom, he's exceeded it.
Yep,
he's exceeded it. Right?
He did.
He scored huge goals. He's got 500. But the Pittsburgh Penguins carried that franchise like this is superstar status.
Yes, he did.
From a talent perspective.
Yep.
And I mentioned, I mean, when see, it was part of it, but overall body of work, Sidney Crosby is,
And so,
right
what's coming up in the NHL, and I don't think it's there's a lot of trade talk. Trade deadline. It actually doesn't come up until March, but a lot of talk about some of the older players like a Claude Giroux, those type of players. He's played with Philadelphia his whole career, but he could end up somewhere. And do the Rangers have enough pieces to win a Stanley Cup, or are they missing something? So look for a lot of activity, and I think the Rangers have a lot of talent. I know they have their eyes on like a JT Miller or somebody like that. I just wonder whether or not there's going to be a lot of movement at the NHL trade deadline to put some of these teams that are right on the cusp, push them over the edge.
I tell you what, Claude Giroux, 15 years as a Philadelphia Flyer, and he's the longest standing captain of the Flyers, right? I mean, 15 years has gone by. Like, that's the type of player. Like, I remember when Claude Giroux was a baby. Like,
me too. I can't believe it's 15 years.
Right. So that's one of those guys for me. But let's say the Colorado Avalanche or something, who we talk about it the last 3 years, like probably the most talented team in the league, and they just can't get out of that second round.
Yeah.
But if they make a deal like getting the Claude Giroux, I think that would make sense.
Yeah.
Here's a deal that didn't happen, but he came back this week. Jack Eichel made his Vegas debut. And again, time flies. Like we were talking about it. He had his surgery in November, in the disc surgery in the back. Yeah. And here he is, right? And Jack Eichel, the Vegas Golden Knights are having a good year. And this is Jack Eichel we're talking about. So this is another piece. So my point is Colorado has to get by Vegas And as good as Colorado is, that's why they're not advancing, because they're
Yep.
playing this really, good team.
But
So
there's
making
great parity right now in the NHL. And I think, some of these moves in the trade deadline, you're right. Just like the Avalanche, it could push a team that's on the cusp to get over that hump. And that's a good example. I'll give you kudos for that, because the Avalanche have been right there and just haven't hoisted it since Joe Sakic days.
right. As far as the New York Rangers go, listen, Igor Shesterkin, their goalie. The Rangers, had a tough game against Detroit, but came out of the gates. Their first game against the Boston Bruins. Igor Shesterkin is 23-5. 23-5, and there's this crazy number too. Like when he was in Russia and played all these Russian games and something,
Yep.
his record over like the last freaking 5 years is insane. It's insane. But Igor Shesterkin, the Rangers have a great young goalie. We're having a great year. JT Miller, former Ranger, is in Vancouver. I don't think it's going to cost an awful lot to get him, but JT Miller is probably 28, 29 now. He was a baby with the Rangers.
Yeah,
That's the type of guy, like if
Yep.
they could get a JT Miller, it can only help.
Yep. So listen, the NHL, it's exciting, and we talked a little bit about it. The NCAA basketball tournament, where we're rapidly approaching March Madness, and Gonzaga back on top, third time number one.
Right.
And they're actually a fun team. I want to see this kid Holmgren, right? The tall kid, Chet Holmgren, because he's, he looks so young, he looks so underdeveloped, but he's really going to be a player. And they got him for 4 more years, so I don't see them going anywhere. But they've fallen short year after year after year, and this may be the year for Gonzaga, especially with every time an Auburn takes over or a Baylor takes over, right? They lose.
Yeah.
But one of the bigger stories I thought in the NCAA basketball was about Rutgers. I mean, they knocked off 4 ranked teams in the past month, and it's a good story. I mean, it really is.
So we've referenced my good dear friend George Breen, our resident golf guru, and George is a Rutgers fan. He graduated Rutgers, and for the past 2 weeks, he's been calling me saying, "Rutgers, right?" This isn't a guy that just throws around compliments, but he said, "Watch for Rutgers." And he was right. So Rutgers beat Ohio State. They convincingly beat Illinois. They're 10-5 in the Big Ten. They're going to the dance, and things didn't look good for Rutgers about maybe a month ago or so. But they've turned it around, and they can make some noise in the tournament early.
Yep. Yeah, I think. Listen, and when we talk about college hoops, like I said, there's a lot. This is Coach K's, final season, and that moves us on to our random points of interest, because there was something specific about that I wanted to bring up, and it was,
I know where you go.
Yeah, the book by Ian O'Connor,
Sure.
The Rise and the Reign of Coach K, and I've always liked this Ian O'Connor. You and I have been following him since he was writing for the Bergen Record, 30 years ago.
I would love to have Ian O'Connor on our show.
Yes, and that's something I would love to have too, because he wrote a book on Arnie and Jack, which is one of the most insightful golf books I've ever read. So this guy has credibility, and I watched him.
Impeccable credentials.
He does, but I did watch him speak, and he was speaking to a couple other really. He was kind of alluding to the fact that, Tommy Amaker wanted the job, and he didn't want to give that job to Tommy Amaker. So it brought up the point, is Coach K possibly, was this a racial thing? And I don't think it was, but you hear about it and you say, wait a minute, John Shire has never coached a college basketball game, and Tommy Amaker has been all over the place.
He's been at Harvard for the last 10 plus years. So
Yeah, 15 actually.
15, I was going to say.
And
You're
you
right.
know, when I was watching the discussion with Ian O'Connor, you know, he wasn't unflattering about Coach K. He doesn't deny that he's great, but he is a control freak, and he's got a potty mouth like he's never heard before, which you don't assimilate with Coach K. But I tell you, the book itself, and you know what, we're going to try to get Ian O'Connor on the show because it was a great topic of discussion as Coach K winds down his last year.
Oh, yeah. And listen, there was a tidbit, too, I found fascinating. And, obviously, you got to read the book. But the fallout of Coach K and Robert Montgomery Knight, the general, right? So Bobby Knight was Mike Krzyzewski's mentor at Army. A lot of people know this, so on and so forth. And Bobby Knight was very instrumental in recommending Krzyzewski to get the Duke job, so on and so forth. And these two were as tight as you could possibly be. And a fallout occurred, I think, it's been a long time now.
I think it was 2015. It was like some get together at Pinehurst Golf Club, and
right. And Coach K gets on one knee, and Bobby's in the corner, talking to a few friends, and basically ignored him. And Coach K got up and said, "That's the last effing time I'm dealing with this." So I don't see it as being able to going to be fixed. It sounds like Bobby Knight, his health is in decline. I mean, Bobby Knight's got to be mid 80s by now. But I found that to be interesting. I didn't know.
No, that's a great
fallout.
Yeah, that's a great story because they go back so far, and Krzyzewski finally had enough. And hey, one of our users just chimed in and said, "Hey, why don't we get Coach K on the show?" Well, I would love to have Coach K. That would take up the entire show. But it's a great book. I think I'm going to read it, and I just thought it was interesting.
Because we don't think Coach K's people are going to.
Yeah,
Coach K's too busy,
Well, we'll leave that up to our
listen,
producer,
the
Rob,
other
to get
thing,
him on.
the other point was made about Coach K hiring Shire. And again, Coach K's got like 3 kids that work at Duke, his son-in-law,
Yeah.
I mean, he's Duke, right? He's the most powerful guy in Duke. Coach K, obviously is retiring, but don't say, like he's not going to have John Shire coming to him and, well, John, you're playing Wake Forest on the road. I would do this, or behind the scenes helping him recruit stuff.
No, it's a good topic though.
But I do think personally, I think Tommy Amaker, I was kind of surprised. I thought Tommy Amaker would be a well-deserved heir apparent.
But it was clearly Coach K's decision not to give it to Tommy Amaker for whatever reason. But it's probably a great read, and we'll see if we can get Mr. O'Connor on our show. I just want to go down a couple of quick other points, Steve. The Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders got a $2.5 million settlement. What a big surprise that was.
Well, listen, it was kind of a surprise to me. Rich Dalrymple, 32 years, the PR guy. But listen, when you hear his explanation, it's not credible.
How about this? The Mets bringing back Old Timers Day for the first time in forever. And you and I've touched on this. It's the Old Timers Day when we were kids in Yankee Stadium was all the other players from Major League Baseball. It was such a different paradox than it is now. But you know what? I think that's good. I think it's a good change to bring that back. And, it's not going to have that allure, but I just thought it was interesting that the Mets ownership decided to bring that back.
Listen, that's a great PR move, right? I mean, it's a good PR move.
Yep.
However, you can be rest assured that number 4, Lenny Dykstra, will not be taking part in the Old Timers
Right,
festivities. Why, people? Because Lenny Dykstra is an absolute train wreck.
Yep.
He's just a train wreck. So,
And unfortunately, and we've certainly talked about it, the Mets Old Timers Day wouldn't be the same, unless Tom Seaver was there, and he won't be there. So, but anyway, you're right. Good PR move. Here's a little shout out for you. Your Boston University Terrors win the Beanpot tournament again.
that's right. We won the Beanpot. It's been a few years. Northeastern, they're three-time defending champs. But I was going to bring that up. So the first 2 weeks in February for folks outside of the Northeast or whatever.
Yep.
So in Boston U, my alma mater, Boston College, Harvard, and Northeastern, the four Boston schools, they play a hockey tournament, and it's at the Boston Garden or the TD Bank. It is such a fun, outstanding atmosphere.
And it's a breeding ground for future NFL NHL players.
No question. There's so many NHLers that played in this game. It's on a Monday night. It's one of the greatest, college venues out there. So BU won finally, but BU won for the 31st time, which is by far the most of the four schools.
Yep. And one other random point I wanted to bring up, it was kind of devastating, was this fire at the Oakland Hills Golf Club, which has hosted majors and Ryder Cups and everything. And, the question is, you could always rebuild the house, but how much golf memorabilia that was in that building was destroyed. It's heartbreaking when you watched it. This ravaged a incredibly big clubhouse and so forth. And I just wanted to mention that from a notable perspective, because this is one of the great places on the PGA Tour.
Absolutely. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah.
Very unfortunate.
And our last topic was, I just wanted to bring up from a random point, was college football playoffs. It's now, we knew it was ultimately going to expand beyond the 4 teams, but it doesn't appear it's going to happen until 2026. But I think that is going to, I don't know what the right number is. 8, is that the right number? Something. But they just can't seem to come to an understanding on that, and that's why it's been dragging on for so long.
Well, I'd rather they drag it on for so long and get it right than just jumping into it arbitrarily and throwing a number out there.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's going to.
It's not a surprise that it's slowly going to expand up. But it's not going to be March Madness type of thing.
And as we wrap up with our notable passings, and thank goodness from a sports perspective there wasn't, but there was from an entertainment perspective somebody that we liked a lot, Ivan Reitman. I mean, from Animal House, Ghostbusters, all that kind of fame. This guy got it done. He was
absolutely.
He was big in Hollywood.
One of our favorites, no question.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like a Harold Ramis passing away type of guy. It's like that core of comedy. These are the guys that were behind the scenes, the directors, the writers, type of thing, with the Aykroyds and Belushis and stuff.
He was definitely a big shot in Hollywood.
No question. Ivan Reitman had a great Hollywood career.
75 years old.
That's it's a little too young.
So, listen, before we wrap up, Steve, I just want to remind folks to, please send us an email at sportswithmonoandmono@gmail.com. And wanted to thank our producer, Rob. You can catch our live broadcast on Facebook Live on Saturdays and the I-95 Sports Network. And
all right, so we have that sports page, Sports with Mono and Mono Facebook page you can go to and see the show, and of course with Blackjack TV that you mentioned.
And I just wanted to give
YouTube as well.
And I wanted to give a shout out to old college classmate of mine, Tom Kramer, and his family from Dublin, California. They're really into the show, and I'm happy that they're checking us out today on Facebook Live. So thank you, Mr. Kramer.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer and family. Absolutely.
So listen, we'll catch you guys next week. There's going to be just as much to talk about next week as there is this week. And thanks for joining us, everybody. Feel free to chime in and give us comments during the live broadcast. Send us an email, and we'll catch up to you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.